Okay, great. So was that your comment, Trish? I saw your hand go up for a second.
No, I hit my computer inadvertently. Sorry.
No problem. Just want to make sure I didn't miss you. Okay, so so pledge allegiance, then we do the approval of the minutes. So did our board members have a chance to review the minutes, January minutes that Ben put together?
Yes, I did.
Let me just bring it up here real quick for our edification or memory. So any comments on minutes? I thought they looked good, but I wanted to hear from my other board members.
I think they look great.
So
Bill, I'd like to make a note that in the January meeting, we never made a vote on the approval of the December minutes as well.
oh, that's
And
right.
if-
I had made the modifications that you had recommended or that we had discussed during the meeting. So I guess I should have sent that back for review. And so did you draft these, Ben, or was this Ryan?
These were drafted by Debbie and we
Debbie.
edited them at the last meeting.
That's
I
right.
don't believe there are any outstanding comments to
Yeah,
address on the December
we
minutes.
did make an adjustment, but I can't remember right off the top that it was exactly what it was. So given that we've got two documents for approval, may I have a motion to approve our December and January minutes?
I'll motion to approve the December and January minutes.
And may I have a second?
I'll motion to approve the December and January minutes.
Great. We'll take yours as the second. So thank you, Ben and Trish, and anyone else who had a chance to review them. Appreciate that. So, okay, so we approved the minutes. Just wanted to touch on this real quickly. The EAC Network Conference on Saturday, February 26th. Do we have any of our current members that had indicated attending?
Phil, I was interested in attending and I had a conflict previously, so I wasn't able to make it, but I just remembered that conflict cleared up for me. So I might attend. I need to take a second look.
All right, great. Yeah, I signed up and we'll have to check with Mike or Eunice if they when they show up. Then we initiated a discussion on a plastic bag ban. That's what we're here for, the majority of the meeting tonight. So we have Farron in attendance. The other guests have come to this to hear our discussion about plastic bag bans because our neighboring townships are all interested in pursuing this also. And as I might have mentioned or sent you guys notes, Trish and I attended a February 1st meeting with a coalition of Montgomery County municipalities that are also interested. So I believe there's at least 12 munis that are currently talking about this. Some are further along and have presented their ordinances, and others are still working on those. So I did forward to the board copies of Doylestown, Easttown, Lower Merion, and Narberth work on their ordinances. We could see good examples of surveys from and results from all four of them. All four of them found that their residents and their businesses were positively open to the plastic bag ban. There were some, that are resistant or not in favor, but the majority are in favor. So I think we're finding that and that was true among the other attendees at the February 1st meeting. So I think we're finding that there is a majority of interest in this and pro support for it. So I think if we are amenable to moving this along, I think that we would be in good company to bring it up for consideration to council. So I think, if you've had a chance to review all the documents over the weekend, this will, go a little smoother because we can now ask fair and specific questions of any concern or interest. But if you'd like to review any of the documents, I have them open so we can go to each of them to take a look. So, are there any opening comments from the board? First of all, let me start with the board. I want your feedback on what you saw in the documents that I distributed and any questions you might have. But let's go around for each of the board members first, and then we'll come back and we'll have questions for Farron. But I wanted to get your impressions first. So if I could start with alphabetically, how about we go with Mike Capicelli? Capicelli, sorry.
That's okay, Bill. Yeah, I guess, if I had one question for it, from it, it was what people who oppose it, what's the biggest gripe that they come up with when they want to oppose it?
All right, or rather than answer each question right now, let's write those questions down.
Sure, sorry, Bill.
No, I'm not objecting to your question at all. I just want to kind of get and it's good that you're raising the questions because we'll create a queue here for asking Farron. But I wanted to get your overall impression on whether you're supportive of this, whether you think this is worth pursuing, just what's your personal take on it also.
Oh yeah, I support it. I think like we had talked about last meeting, when we were over the holidays in New Jersey, a couple of the towns I went to the store when I was there, they all had no plastic bags at all in them. And it was a little weird at first because, I don't live there, but after I went out for the second or third time, it was no big deal. I think it's a no brainer. I hate to abuse the phrase, low hanging fruit, but I really think it's a no-brainer. It's just be implemented. So whatever we have to do to push it through, I'm behind it. So
great, and we'll queue up your question for Farron.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
The rest of the board member. Thanks, Mike. Good feedback. So let me try to figure out my alphabet. I'm going by last name, so I'm going to go to Ben.
Yep. I looked through all the materials and there's quite a bit, and it's great to see the variety from the different municipalities that are like ours that we can draw from their example. I had a similar question from Mike, like what's the main pushback for an ordinance like this? Are there any examples of municipalities that did start earnest discussions about plastic bag bans, but then had to put it on hold because it went cold or like that? That'd be interesting to know. Another question I have is, are there any resources on a local or even national level of big box retail stores in localities that have banned plastic bags and how they deal with it? The big ones like Lowe's and Home Depot. I did a couple Google searches and I found plenty of Lowe's that appeared to be in areas where plastic bags are restricted. Without doing a lot more research, it's hard to really verify that, but it seems like there is discussion about that. That'd be interesting to see if there's, an off-the-shelf resource that could be used to point that out.
Thank you.
Another thought I had is that we can add to the list is I'm just curious if there's ever been a concern of these surveys of there being a selection bias, since these surveys appear to be sent out to a group of interested parties, and then the response is sort of indicating the interest that was inherent in the willingness to respond to the survey in the first place. I'm just curious about that. And if I could add one more to the list, I noticed that Target and CVS are part of what I read as the consortium to reinvent the retail bag. And I learned some interesting initiatives Target is doing, like putting kiosks in stores where you can essentially rent or like take a bag, leave a bag. And I'm curious if there are any alternatives to a plastic bag ban that have been considered, or maybe this could complement that as well. Those are my preliminary thoughts at this point.
Yep, appreciate it. Good list, good list. Thank you for your thorough thinking on this. Let me step up to Andy.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
My mic sometimes has trouble here. Yeah, I mean, just certainly haven't made it through all the material you sent out there. But what I've reviewed, it's good. I've general support. I think I don't know. I tend to think more in a zero waste and focusing on a specific thing. And so, I think maybe this plastic bag ban is the most the low-hanging fruit other people have used. So I guess it's a good start. I just kind of wonder about other single-use plastics. I don't know if we want to target them right away or come back to them, or how if you think it's better to come back, kind of build on this, or if you think it's better to try to do one round of effort. The other thing, I didn't see it in the draft. I don't know if this is more an environment thing, but it talks about so-called, I guess, biodegradable plastics, and I don't know if there's any. I don't know the stance on that, I guess, is what I'm thinking. So I just ask about that, if the ordinance should or should not include that. Because it's not just the plastic bags that you use at checkout, but it's those other bags that you might get your fruit or something in. So kind of question on what we do about that. Are those included or excluded? I think that's all I've got so far.
Great list. Thanks. And we can always add to it as we go through the discussion. Trish.
Yes, I was pleasantly surprised to see the positive feedback, at 80% in some cases. I guess my question would be, I did see some conflicting messages where do we intend to move from plastic to paper? I know that there's a fee and that the stores can keep that fee, but is that fee to cover paper bags, or, are we going to transition it that way? Or is the intent to just move from plastic to everyone bringing your own bags to places such as Home Depot? The grocery store is kind of what I had in mind. And I do agree with Andrew with the plastic bags for vegetables, because they use a lot of those as well. So do we kind of hit it in both places where it's plastic bags, period? And I guess that was really all I had to question.
Good ones. Thank you, Trish.
Mhm.
Carolyn. Carolyn, are you muted?
I'm unmuted now, sorry.
So do you have feedback on what your impressions are?
Well, I talked to a lot of people about the plastic bags. And I think it's a big problem, but some people just see it as a convenience. And, you know, they like to use the bags for their trash cans and things like that.
So are you in favor or against it?
I'm in favor. I've been in favor of it for years.
Okay. So you're thinking people will resist because they like to keep plastic bags for their trash?
Yeah. And they just, you know, I think it's a lot of it is a re-education of people. And they don't really understand how much damage the plastic bags do.
Thank you. Good feedback. So I'll ask our council liaisons, Karen Bramlett, what's your impression on this issue and what's your guidance for us?
Sorry, I had to unmute. So this is Karen. So I was wondering, responding to what Andy said, and I know Carolyn has been very active with this on adding other single-use plastics, the straws that are being used by a lot of restaurants and takeouts and fast food, because there are alternatives. There are paper straws. Carolyn was the one who introduced me to paper straws, which I only use now. I also noticed that with some of the other townships, they did have some exclusions for things where perhaps an alternative doesn't exist. I can't, it must have been Lower Merion's. I noticed that, and I can't remember everything they excluded, but I do remember seeing that they excluded newspapers, where the newspaper is put into a plastic bag when it's being thrown into the snow or wet pavement, rainy days. I wondered, after what Carolyn said, the trash bags, if it would reach to homeowners using their own trash bags, you know, the kitchen bags and the bathroom bags and the big trash can container, the big black ones. And then the other question I had, which I guess will go to Farron, is where they came up with the 10-cent charge for retailers to charge for paper bags. If that's the actual cost to a retailer, or just wondered about the 10-cent cost. I personally don't like plastic bags. You see them in the trees. You see animals go after them. So I think that in addition to how long they take to break down in the environment and the damage they can cause to wildlife, and people using plastic as mulching in their gardens and everything. You know, I know that a lot of farmers just put down rows and rows of black plastic every year, and then it just gets all churned up and they till and put it down the next year. So, you know, a lot of stakeholders, I guess, you need to reach out to. But, you know, it seems like it's a lot of municipalities are looking into it. And I'm sorry, I was writing, and so I'd moved my laptop. Here I am. So those are just some of my comments. If you wanted to add other things, you know, there are the straws. And again, I did have that question about how the cost of 10 cents was, they came up with. I think it was Lower Merion.
Good feedback. And if I could ask Lynn, our new liaison, for any of your thoughts on this topic, being new to it. We've already had two somewhat limited discussions, but just want to get your first impressions.
Sure. No, thank you. I have not had the opportunity to sort of dig in deeply on some of the materials or the documents, so they are sort of top of mind comments and questions. And I apologize for things you've already discussed, but I guess one of the things I was wondering, because I think there's a lot of comment about other single-use plastics, like has the group considered sort of a phased approach? So we start with plastic bags and then we worry about straws and then we go to other types of plastics. Like, have you considered sort of a longer term strategy with this? That's one question. And also, Bill, I know you mentioned that there are other townships who are interested in doing the same thing. I'm wondering if we've looked at townships who have done it and if there are any of their learnings, like from their transition, that we might be able to get a hold of so that we don't like trip over the same things maybe they've tripped over. Thinking about sort of enacting a transition plan into this and just learning from anyone else who's done it ahead of us. And I think someone asked the question why some people might oppose it. Maybe people or retailers. I think it's a great question. I would love to hear more about why someone might stand against this also, so that we can kind of get in front of, addressing those things proactively.
Great feedback, Glenn. Thank you. Yeah, we do have one local example. Narberth has had their ban in place, I believe, since last summer. So we can learn directly from what they've started to experience, and I believe Philadelphia has implemented it, so we can learn from a little bit from them. And I think Ambler is about ready to present their ordinance for adoption. I think it's in our draft mode or discussion with their council. So great round of feedback and comments, questions. So Farron, if you can maybe dive into some of the questions you remember, and if we miss any, we'll come back to it if we miss them all.
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me back. And I recognize a lot of people on this call, but if I haven't met you yet, I'm Farron. I'm the Zero Waste Advocate with Penn Environment. We're a statewide environmental nonprofit. I think the best place to start is sort of a background on who else has done this, where it's in place around the state. The Narberth was the first municipality in Pennsylvania to pass a plastic bag ban. Theirs is a ban and a fee, and they also include straws in that. They put it on pause during the pandemic for the worst of things the past few years, and I think they only just started reintroducing it last month or this month. So it's very recently come back into effect. But along with Narberth, Westchester are enforcing a plastic bag ban and a straw ban. There's also has a fee component to it. Philadelphia began enforcing their ban on plastic bags back in October, though there aren't any penalties for retailers until the spring. And then West Goshen Township are the most recent place to pass a plastic bag ban. They did it over the holidays, so theirs won't go in effect at all until the spring. They're doing sort of a delayed rollout. So it's those four places that have passed things so far. Ambler actually voted on an ordinance last week, but they decided to table it for further discussion because they felt they hadn't developed the ordinance language itself fully. So I'm working with them to sort of retool that ordinance, make it stronger, more clear, better for both consumers and retailers, and the best it can be. But they're looking at a bunch of different plastics. So not just bags, but styrofoam containers, plastic utensils, and straws all together. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in the chat a link to a model plastic bag ban that we put together using what's worked in Pennsylvania, what's worked in other states and municipalities across the country. And it's sort of like a plug and play model where you can pick and choose what you want, but basically it's some of the best practices. So it's a cool jumping off place you can use. Laura Marion's used it. Pittsburgh modeled their introduced plastic bag ban off of it. Media and Haverford and Delco are using it as a base. So it's a good place to sort of look at to get an idea of what could go into an ordinance. Though it is only plastic bags, we have a different model that has a bunch of stuff thrown together. But I think the best place to start with would be the question of opposition. So I heard a lot of people asking about retailers or other people opposing it, or how this could work in terms of pushback. And the main thing I want to say is that there is far less pushback on an ordinance for like a plastic bag ban than you would expect, especially if you do it correctly and have good policies included. You're not going to see a lot of retailers speaking out against it. A sort of counterpoint to that would be Philadelphia, whose ordinance isn't the strongest example you could look to, and certainly not the best for retailers. And so we've seen a mix of reactions from the business community there, where not everyone's in compliance with Philadelphia's plastic bag ban, not everyone knows what's included in it, and it's been a bit of a mess. But for somewhere like Westchester or Narberth, they've actually seen a lot of compliance from their businesses. I talked to a business in Narberth last week, and they said they've had no issues at all adapting to it. So that's the first thing. You're not going to see as much pushback as you expect. The second thing is with large chain retailers or big box stores. They all have had to deal with this in countless other cities and states. Like anyone that does business in New York has to deal with a plastic bag ban. Anyone that does business in Connecticut or Massachusetts or California. I think there are in total 7 or 8 statewide plastic bag bans in the United States right now. So any chain that has locations in those states knows how to deal with an ordinance. And then you also have hundreds of local policies everywhere, including in states that don't have their own statewide bans. So in terms of the big box stores like Lowe's or Home Depot, I wouldn't worry about them and figuring out how they're going to comply with a plastic bag ban. They figured it out before, they can do it again, and it's not that difficult to transition. A big component of getting stores to comply is including a fee in your ordinance. Having a small fee, we recommend 15 cents, but 10 cents is generally the minimum you can go to actually get good results. Because retailers keep that fee, it helps cover the cost of switching from plastic to paper. It helps them self-enforce because it more than covers that cost. And so they're actually making a little extra money on top of it. And so they're far more likely to follow an ordinance because they're benefiting from it. Whereas if you don't include that fee and you just have a ban on plastic, suddenly there's no benefit to retailers. It's costing them more because paper is more expensive than plastic, and you have a huge problem. So when we see a fee on all non-plastic bags, you actually get retailers being much more supportive, especially grocery stores. In Philly, where we don't have a fee currently, some stores have started voluntarily adopting fees, like Acme is charging 10 cents a bag currently in Philadelphia, just because it's better for them to do that. So that's one part of it. I'm trying to keep in my head all the questions you guys asked because there are a lot of good ones there. But another thing with getting people to comply and preventing pushback, one thing we're seeing in some places are questions of equity, questions of fairness, how it affects low-income communities. And one thing I'll say to that is we haven't seen complaints from low-income communities about plastic bag bans causing problems to them or a fee being inequitable or too much. Part of that is because stores bake the cost of plastic bags into all the items they sell you currently. Like a bag isn't free, you just don't see that cost up front, and a fee sort of puts that cost front and center. And one of the cool things about the fee is that it gets people to use fewer bags overall. So that way you're not just replacing plastic one-to-one with paper. Now you're suddenly using fewer single-use bags entirely. You're remembering your own reusable alternative. And so stores have to purchase fewer bags than they were before. They don't need to store them. They don't need to work out the logistics. And so overall cost of everything can go down for them. And so that's a benefit for low-income communities. You're also seeing less costs for litter cleanup, less cost of stormwater maintenance because plastic bags clog stormwater, which makes flooding worse. And we've seen flooding especially affects low-income communities more than other communities. So once you no longer have plastic bags, you're seeing less cost of maintaining that infrastructure. It can help with waste costs because plastic bags can't be recycled. And so when they go into your recycling, they can invalidate entire loads, which makes it more expensive for the people who process the waste, the people who haul the waste, and generally increases the cost of all those services. So you see a lot of places where getting rid of plastic bags and reducing the overall number of bags entirely is just good for low-income communities because it drives all costs down when you look at it. But one thing some communities are doing, we're exploring this in Pittsburgh right now, Philly has done a bunch of it, but you can provide reusable bags for low-income communities. That way, no cost at all. That way they can have a reusable bag so they can avoid the bag fees. Because if you bring your own bag, you don't pay that 10 or 15 cents, whatever you set it at. And so that's a way to avoid that cost. And so Pittsburgh is planning, if they vote and pass their plastic bag ban, they're planning to provide reusable bags from centralized locations. I know in Philadelphia, various community groups, watershed groups, environmental groups were providing reusable bags for free. Wawa and Target were providing reusable bags for free. So there are a lot of places for communities to get these during the rollout. And an important part of the rollout is making sure it's not like we've passed an ordinance and boom, everyone has to get rid of their plastic bags. You want that adjustment period between when it goes into effect and when bags actually have to stop being used, to let retailers make those changes, to put up signs telling people that this is coming, to give consumers a chance to adjust, and generally making it sort of an easier transition for everyone, not just consumers, not just retailers, but the township as well. So that's sort of broad strokes on pushback and if we see much opposition. That was a longer answer, but short answer, no, there's not that much opposition. A few smaller questions I heard in there. The first one is on bioplastics or compostable plastics, plant-based plastics. We don't recommend providing those as an alternative. Generally, they're not actually compostable. You would need industrial composting to do it because they have specific heat treating methods and bacteria treatments that will actually cause those plastics to break down. But if you're just in your backyard compost or a municipal compost or most commercial composts, those bioplastics don't break down. They'll still be there years down the line. They break into microplastics, which will then get everywhere. And they're also single use, so they have a material cost to create. And so we recommend not allowing bioplastics. In the definition in our ordinance, we define plastic as including both petrochemical derived plastic and biologically derived plastic as a sort of catch-all, so that you can't use those as sort of a greenwashed alternative. So that's the answer there. In terms of people using their plastic bags, like reusing plastic grocery bags for trash or for pet waste, some people do that. And often we find that the people who are most environmentally conscious reuse the bags that they get. The problem is not enough people do that. And so part of the reason we need an ordinance is because if everyone reused their plastic bags, if businesses did their part to reduce single-use plastic pollution and make it possible to actually recycle these bags, we wouldn't need the ordinance. But the fact of the matter is, voluntary action isn't enough. And so we need a ban on plastic bags. We need the fees on all other bags in order to make that change. And so for the people who are reusing their plastic bags, they can reuse paper if they get them, or the bans don't apply to pre-packaged bags you can buy at a store. So like you could still buy trash bags or pet waste bags if you want to. Personally, I have 2 cats and they generate a ton of litter every day. And I live in Philly where we don't have plastic bags. And so I use paper bags to get rid of their litter. It's just sort of another part of transitioning to that life. People get used to it. Another question that I heard was alternate or other types of plastic you can roll into it. And I mentioned before, Ambler's looking into a bunch of different plastics. Westchester, West Goshen, and Narberth all included plastic straws. And you can certainly go ahead and include other types of single-use plastics in your ordinance. The reason we push a plastic bag ban first is that it's highly visible, they're easy alternatives, and it's a good place to start, just because it can be difficult for people to transition or to make that switch in their mind. Like, I shouldn't be using the single use option every single time. I should remember my own reusable. And so you can start with bags. Sometimes it's just politically easier or easier for your retailers to do that. And then after you get a bag ban passed and implemented and going smoothly, you can go back and get bans on polystyrene products, on coffee cups, on utensils, on straws, all of that. However, and I know we have members of your council here who are interested in other types of plastic as well. If you think your council is willing to include other types of plastic in that ban, also include polystyrene, also include utensils or straws, go for it. If you think that's something the retailers in Plymouth or in West Norton might want, then, or be okay with, then that's certainly an option to do, and more power to you. You'll have a more ambitious and a more impactful ordinance. But it is also a sort of tiered approach you can take where you start with bags and move on to the next one. They're both options that work. And then another thing I had heard from the questions just left my head. I'm forgetting some of the other specifics. So Bill, do you have?
How about produce bags? What do we do for people who want to take the produce out?
Yeah, so most plastic bag bans are retail bags. So it's from the point of sale, and it doesn't apply to bags used internally inside a store. So it wouldn't apply to produce bags. It wouldn't apply to the plastic that covers meat that you get at a butcher counter or the fish you get at a seafood counter. It wouldn't apply to the bags that package loose or bulk packaged nuts, candy, pet food, all that. Those types of bags are exempt just because of health code reasons or other sanitary reasons. Stores need to provide them. And it's also harder to regulate because those bags aren't at the point of sale. And the point of sale is a much easier place to regulate bags. So there are reusable alternatives to produce bags and those other types of bags, but these ordinances don't cover them. So they would still be available to consumers. But they represent a much smaller part of the waste stream than the retail bags do. So less of a concern.
And since it's the point of sale bags, we aren't talking about garbage bags or kitchen sink bags or the yard waste bags. None of that is applied, right?
Bags you can buy prepackaged in a store, these bans would not apply to. So you'd still be able to get trash bags, you'd be able to buy yard waste bags. Those would all still be available.
And what's your thoughts on selection bias for these surveys? You know, the fact that we're speaking to the already converted and the already, pro-environmental kind of population in our communities. What's your feeling? Are we getting a fair representation of the resistance or the people against it?
I'm in sort of two minds about the surveys. The first is that some of these surveys do get a fair representation. I know Doylestown did a good job of getting a lot of responses and reaching out to a lot of people for their survey. And so I don't think there was selection bias with their results. Easttown, with their business survey, they went out and just canvassed businesses on foot and knocked on doors and really did the hard work to get those responses. So I don't think there's selection bias there. I think though, especially with resident surveys, the people you hear from are the people who care about an issue. And so you would get lots of response. If there were lots of people who didn't want a plastic bag ban, you would hear them in the surveys. You'd be seeing lots of responses vigorously opposed to it, and you wouldn't see such overwhelming support for an ordinance. So even if there's some amount of selection bias in terms of who responds to the survey, I think you're seeing that the people who respond are the ones who care about an issue and who are motivated. And so I think that in and of itself tells you something about these ordinances and about fighting plastic pollution, that they resonate with residents, that people see litter as an issue. And so non-responses from people who don't care or people who are less active or something, I don't really think it's that much of a concern.
And how do you feel about this being a springboard for us moving towards zero waste? You know, trying to start to educate our population about the value of not, you know, buying extra packaging, you know, the plastic packaging, stuff like that. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so at Penn Environment, our whole zero waste program is sort of based around the idea that we live in a throwaway society where we're geared as consumers to just use something and toss it aside without really thinking about where it goes. But every product we use and throw away has some sort of end of life harm for our environment and our health, be that a landfill, an incinerator, recycling, what have you. And a plastic bag ban is a great first step to getting people to realize that when they throw something away, it has a cost, and realizing that they have alternatives and they don't need to use something. So if you go to a store and you think, oh, normally I'd be getting 4 plastic bags, and rather than get 4 paper bags, each one of them is going to cost me 15 cents. I'm only going to get 2 paper bags. And they've now cut down on the amount of bags they use. And so every time they shop, they're using fewer bags. Or it'll get them to remember, oh, I'll have a reusable bag in my car. It'll be next to the door of my house. So when I leave, it'll be in my purse or my backpack or something. That way I'm never without a reusable bag, so I can avoid that fee. And then they're always thinking about that reusable alternative. And so it also keys people into thinking, oh, maybe when I go to the coffee shop, I'll bring a reusable mug instead of getting a plastic takeout mug there. Or, oh, maybe when I go to a store, I won't grab a straw. I'll remember I have a metal straw that I keep in my bag or something. And it's the little tweaks that get people to start making that shift in thinking. And so a plastic bag ban and fee is a great jumping off point to make that shift. And you can make it a more it can be more impactful with other types of plastic right off the get-go, but the plastic bags are a good place to start and can definitely get people to change their thinking.
Thank you. Great, great information. So let's go in reverse order to see which questions are still remaining. I'll start with Lynn, our counsel.
I'm not sure I have any other questions at this point. I'm sure I will, but I
No,
don't right now.
we can come back to you. You can, we'll go another round, but I want to go back, make sure everybody has a chance. Karen?
Thank you.
Yeah, Farron, I had a couple of ideas based on what you said. One was going back to the 10-cent fee and how it helps retailers actually make some money and helps with the cost of transition. Whole Foods has the model where they have always used paper if you don't bring your own, but they give you a nickel for every one of your own bags that you use, a nickel off your fee, or you can choose to donate it to one of their one of their charities. So how do you balance the I earn a nickel versus I have to pay 10 cents for the paper bag?
Psychologically, a cost that applies to everyone is going to be more effective than a credit you get for doing something good. So like Washington, DC, they charge something like 3 cents, I think, for every bag. But if you bring your own bag, you get some amount of money back. And it's like a half and half between, I saw in the chat, the carrot and the stick. And that doesn't really work very well. What we have seen is that fees across the board are going to be more effective than credits, because a fee will make people reduce their bag usage and think about it as a cost, basically. Because right now your bags have a cost. You don't see that cost, but if that cost is visible, if it's on your receipt every time you go and shop and get a bag, you're going to think about it and it's going to change the way you shop. Whereas if it's just sort of whenever you bring a reusable, you get some money back, it's not going to motivate people as much as something being taken away from them.
Okay. And another question I had was, oh, I just want to tell you, I have a cat and a dog, and I can see putting the kitty litter in a paper bag. But I got to tell you, when you're walking your dog in a park and you don't have your little shovel with you and right there to pick it up, I don't know if I want to pick it up with paper, but whatever. They're supposedly compostable, but I'm with you. They just break down to, those green bags just break down to microplastics. So I try not to use them, but I do. And I thought I had one other. Oh, yes. When you were talking about the equity and low income people, and you talked about the reusable free bags during the rollout. So I just wonder, the reusable bags, some of them are washable, sort of maybe, but they don't last forever. So long term, how do you see in low income neighborhoods helping people with having reusable free bags? Would it be like community event giveaways where you might ask for sponsors, where, Whole Foods or Dick's Sporting Goods or someone can put their name on it and give it away? Or just the fact that the reusables don't last forever. Some of them aren't even real fabric. They're kind of a, I don't know, sort of a kind of non-woven pressed thing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously some of the lifetime of reusable bags depends on the material. Like I have some cloth woven bags that I use every week for shopping, and they've been with me, I think, 15 years now, and are still
okay.
going strong. I haven't actually gotten the question about like long-term what to do when your reusable bags break down, but I imagine the best thing you can do would be to have a centralized location for reusable bags. So like if in the township, if the township were to provide reusable bags, not have it just, hand out 1,000 bags right at the rollout of the ordinance, but rather just have them at the township building or something, so that if people needed a reusable bag, they could come and get one. Some places I've seen a give one, get one reusable bag drop off, where I know a ton of people, especially in the environmentally minded community, have hundreds of tote bags or reusable bags that they've gotten at giveaways or other places. And they don't know what to do with them. And so you can sort of return them in a centralized location so that other people could then take them. And so that's one program that could work. That way people with excess bags could get rid of them. People who don't have the bags could collect them. But I mean, again, we haven't seen pushback from the low-income community on these ordinances. We've been working on them in dozens of places. So although it is a concern, it's not, it shouldn't be a huge stumbling block for an ordinance. I also saw some things pass by in the chat. Yeah, some reusable bags are plastic based. However, most fabric, like synthetic fabrics, are made of a type of plastic. And if your reusable bag is made out of a woven form of polypropylene or polyester, it's still going to be better than a single-use film bag, because that single-use film bag, you have to create a new one every time you go shopping. And so that material cost is super high. And if you think about it, say a reusable bag lasts you, I don't know, a year, and you go shopping once a week, that's 52 uses of that reusable bag. That would be 52 single-use plastic bags that reusable bag is now replacing. If it lasts 2 years, you're now over 100 single-use plastic bags. And each one of those single-use bags is coming from fracked natural gas that we extract here, that gets carried through the pipelines all through Southeast Pennsylvania. And so there's a huge cost to making those single-use bags. And the reusable bag eliminates that cost. And it also eliminates the problems with end of life, because each of those hundreds of bags has to go to an incinerator or a landfill because they can't be recycled. So a lot of them end up in our environment, where they'll harm wildlife, they'll get in our waterways, they end up in our bodies eventually. So even if the reusable bag is made of plastic content, it is still better than a single-use film bag.
And we can educate our consumers on better reusable bags in the long run also. Carolyn, do you have any questions for Farren?
Whoops. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're on.
I have to say, this has probably been one of the most enlightening meetings I've been to. It's just a mountain of information to absorb. So thank you to everyone. I don't have any questions right now. I'm sure that after reviewing all this, I probably will. But I don't have any right now.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Sure.
Trish, do you have any questions?
I do have one question, and this came up in a conversation I was having with a friend who said that, oh, I take all my bags back to the grocery store and put it in that recycle bin. And I thought to myself, they probably just send it to Covanta and then I'm breathing it a couple days later. So Farron, my question to you is, where do those bags go that you can take to the recycle bins in the grocery store?
Probably Covanta.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I didn't think there was any use or any market for those bags. It kind of is maybe educating people that to do the right thing, but you're still, yeah, it's still trash. You're just not throwing it out the window.
Yeah, I had someone from the plastic bag industry try and convince me that because everyone's within a certain radius of a grocery store that has a plastic bag drop off, that means 100% of plastic bags are recycled. And that just doesn't pass any sort of reasoning test. Part of it is that you need specialized machinery to recycle plastic bags. Most recycling facilities can't handle them. And so most grocery stores that collect them aren't shipping them off to be recycled at a facility that can handle them. And even if the machinery to handle them was widely available, because plastic comes from fracked natural gas, and we have so much fracked natural gas being extracted, the cost to make new plastic is significantly lower than the cost to recycle old plastic.
Right.
And so the new plastic is always going to outcompete the recycled content on the market. And so recycling plastic just isn't viable. The recycling rate overall for plastic waste is around 8%. And we generate 35 million tons of plastic waste every year. So only 8% of that is getting recycled. For plastic bags, I think that rate is around 2%. And we make, I think it's like 100 billion plastic bags every year or some absurd number just in America. And only 2% of those are gonna get recycled. So those drop off points, it's hard to pin down exactly where they're going, but I'd probably bet on them going to the incinerator.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, but once again, you've been very informative, so I thank you for that.
Thanks, Trish. Let's go to Andy. I'm going to take all our board member comments before I go to any guests.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. No, this is a great meeting. Yeah, everyone was saying very informative. So yeah, I just put in the chat there. So I wasn't trying to say that the reusable bags aren't necessarily better, even though they're plastic based. I wasn't trying to throw any shade on that or anything. In fact, you know, a lot of the reusable plastic bags are made of recycled content as well. So, you know, I think it is better. I just wanted to try to educate there. And there's plastics all around us, right? There's plastics in our computers we're using to talk right now and everywhere else. So, you know, I'm not going to say be careful with the term plastic, but, you know, it really is all around us. And we're not going to get rid of it by any means. We're trying to get rid of these things that we, you know, end up everywhere. You know, all the single-use plastics, I think, are really problematic, and we'll deal with the rest of them much longer term. But anyway, no, I have no real questions. I'm just going to note that, you know, we talked a little bit about the compostable ones. I understand, and I have read also what you said there, that it is kind of special composting that is needed there. It's something I'm just making note of it for myself and sharing that. I'm going to dig into that a little more, because a lot of those plant-based plastics. They are plant fibers that they're using in those. They can be broken down by bugs and animals. So, I just want to understand that a little bit better, but no questions at this time.
There are a few compostable plastics that I think actually compost. It's just very hard to separate that small subset from the majority of bioplastics that can't be composted. And for a lot of them, they turn the plant fibers into a petrochemical-like product in order to then turn it into the plastic to make it act like plastic. So from our perspective, the best environmental alternative is one that can be used over and over again instead of a single-use one. So rather than try and find a workaround for a single-use bag or a single-use utensil that can be sustainably dealt with as waste, just trying to find something that won't become waste in the first place. And as per plastic being everywhere, it really is. I'm sure that the shirt I'm wearing right now has some amount of synthetic content in it, and that's going to be leaching plastic fibers into my wash every time I do laundry. And those plastic fibers get in my drinking water and the air, and they're just everywhere. But we're very careful with the definitions in our models, where we try and make sure to capture as much as we can, as clearly as we can. So like with single-use plastic bags, we define it by manufacturing type. That way, any bag made of a plastic film, so made through a blown film extrusion process, is the language we use, is the bag that's banned. That way, it's not going to affect woven plastic, it's not going to affect plastic fibers, it's only going to be those flimsy film bags that are covered. Or also those thicker film bags that companies will try and pass off as reusable that people just treat as a single-use bag and throw away. So we also use definitions in terms of what can be a reusable bag, ensuring that they have stitched on handles, which is a big problem for the disabled community, where some reusable bags don't have handles and people need those handles in order to actually use the bag. So ensuring that the bags that are compliant have handles, either paper or reusable, ensuring paper bags have recycled content in them, a whole bunch of stuff just to make sure that the language you use sort of gets to the best possible options being used. But it's definitely a concern.
Thanks for your questions, Andy, and responses, Farron. Ben, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask Farron?
I have quite a few follow-up questions I'd love to ask. I think it's a pretty provocative claim to say that the plastic bags we bring to the grocery stores are being incinerated. And in all honesty, if that's happening, I think we need to know that, because that seems like a worse problem than other plastic bags. That seems like lower hanging fruit to me. So I would love to get more information on that and see where these bags are really going. That would be a great way to push why this is important, if that's really happening, and maybe spur some other things. I think that's just a comment on that. I have a question about the Narberth bag ban. You, Farron, you mentioned it was paused for the coronavirus pandemic. I'm wondering why it was paused. Was it because there was like a surge of takeout food and the need for more disposable things? If so, I think it's a very interesting stress test on that regulation. Do you have any more information on that?
I don't know about them specifically. I know a lot of plastic bag bans nationwide were paused at the start of the pandemic because there's an actual strategy from the plastic and fossil fuel industries to claim plastic was cleaner and safer than other materials. And now, a few years in, with more science and research, we know that the coronavirus doesn't live on plastic for less time than it would on a reusable. Plastic is definitely not cleaner or safer than the other options. That was just blatant misinformation that was being spread, but it was enough fear mongering to get some of these bans paused or held off. It also got Pennsylvania's statewide ban on local bans to get extended for another year, and thankfully that ended in December. But I don't know the exact reason behind Narberth. It may have just been because they're a small borough. They wanted to focus their efforts on getting through the early stages, and now they feel comfortable re-implementing it. But we've seen certainly this year a huge surge in municipalities that pause their efforts or pause this conversation, returning to it, and taking it up again. Like the Montgomery EAC coalition of plastic bag townships was mentioned. There's a similar effort in Delaware County. I talked, there was a Zoom last week, I think with 40 different people from various townships in the county itself. So this certainly isn't limited to just a handful of places. There's a ton of interest and action on the issue.
And Farron, just a little background on that pause. So when Narberth and Westchester started creating their ban in 2018 to 2019, the legislature caught wind of this, and the legislature put a ban on plastic bag bans in July of 2019. The ban was supposed to be for a year while they let industry respond, the plastic bag industry respond and assess the impact to businesses. So then we get to July of 2020 when it was supposed to expire. And because of the pandemic, the legislature just continued it for an additional year. So you say it expired in December. I wonder when Narberth was able to implement their ban. Do you know when it went into effect?
They actually ignored preemption entirely in Narberth. They had passed and had an effective date for their ordinance before it happened. So they just figured they'd ignore the preemption entirely. And so they were enforcing it when preemption was in effect. So preemption wasn't a factor for them.
Okay.
Westchester had set an effective date of after preemption ended. That way they could introduce and pass their ordinance, but it wouldn't go in effect until that ban on bans was over. And so once it expired in December, Westchester's ordinance went into effect and they started enforcing it. So that's the story there.
Excellent. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Farron. Another question I have is in the municipalities that have plastic bag bans or that are considering them, what part of that municipality is actually enforcing the ordinance, and who would let the stores know that it's necessary, and who would enforce it? What's the penalty? How does that work on the back end?
Yeah, it's very dependent on the municipality. So like Narberth, super tiny, and their businesses are all very concentrated. And so they're doing it sort of almost voluntarily in their enforcement, where they know there's enough trust between the municipality and their businesses and communication that they don't need to actively enforce it for businesses to follow their ordinance. In Westchester, they're doing a lot of citizen reporting, where people will report violations of the plastic bag ban, and then they have a sustainability officer who will then enforce it with fines. Philadelphia aren't doing exact enforcement yet. They're waiting to do fines until April. But once those fines go into effect, their licensing and inspections department will handle the enforcement because they do other code violations. West Goshen, whose ban doesn't go in effect until the spring, also have a citizen reporting system. That way people can report who's violating it, and you don't need to inspect everyone for plastic bags. It's just a matter of going where you see the violations. And there's sort of a bunch of different options you could take with enforcement. You could decide to roll it into other health code checks or other code enforcement, where if you do regular health and safety inspections of businesses, just add plastic bags to that checklist that the inspector is doing. You could try and have it be a dedicated system, like Lower Merion. They have a sustainability manager. They're probably gonna roll some amount of citizen enforcement and also inspections into her duties. So it's very, very choose your own adventure, I guess, on enforcement. But I mean, look at it this way. There are a bunch of other codes and violations that have to be enforced and inspected So plastic bags shouldn't really be that different from how townships are already treating the issue.
Thanks for that. Another question I wanted to follow up on is you mentioned the detriment of plastic bags in storm sewers and maintenance of drainage and flooding. I'd like to put on the record for our board to follow up with our Public Works Department to get some perspective of what issues we have in the township, and whether it's what sort of an issue is, what issue it causes for our MS4 permit, things like that. But Farron, I'd like to hear if you have any specific examples from other municipalities where that's been a problem.
Yeah, so I'm based out of Philadelphia. We've talked with the Philadelphia Water Department about this. And I have good numbers somewhere, I just don't have them off the top of my head. But like before Hurricane Ida, I think it might have doubled the man hours it took to prep their stormwater infrastructure for the hurricane because of plastic bag pollution. Like plastic bags alone doubled the man hours it required. And doubling those man hours also, you know, is a huge cost to the city and also affects their ability to better prepare for the hurricane in other ways. But there might be some good data from maybe PennDOT about what they do on highways in terms of stormwater on public roads. But it's certainly a huge cost in terms of like plastic bags are the #1 blockage of stormwater infrastructure. I believe that's what the water department said. So in terms of man hours and overall cost, it's a huge impact on it. And we're going to be seeing more and more heavy flooding and rainfall events because of climate change. And so the impacts of our stormwater infrastructure being obstructed is even more important now, I'd say.
Yeah, thank you. I have one last one, maybe a quick one. I'm just curious, where do you know of any locations locally or in the state where these single-use plastic bags are made? And also, what about the other way around? Like, do we have any local manufacturers of reusable bags?
I know both Philadelphia and West Goshen have lists of places you can, for retailers to get compliant bags from. I don't know if that's where the bags are made, but certainly distributors who are local. I talked with PJP, who provide plastic, paper, and reusable bags in the wake of Philly's introduction, because they had some concerns about it. But they're a local Philadelphia company that provide bags for retailers. I know there is a plastic bag manufacturer I think they're in Center County, because the state senator for that manufacturer, where the manufacturer was in his district, was the one who proposed preemption, the ban on local plastic bag bans, because he had a plastic bag manufacturer in his district. So there's at least one in Pennsylvania, but there are also facilities like there's a cracker plant being built in Beaver County out west that's going to turn natural gas into plastic products. There's other infrastructure all across the state that's sort of different bits and pieces of this process. So.
Okay, yeah. Oh, well, I certainly appreciate your broad experience on this matter. And thanks for being a resource to our board.
Yeah, thanks. And
That's it for
great
me.
questions, Ben. Mike, do you have any outstanding questions? You've heard everybody else's.
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Farron, again for coming to talk. You know, we all really appreciate it, obviously. You had mentioned step further, some places, maybe you had said some places had started to ban other things like polystyrene and things like that. Other than the expanded foam cups, what else is polystyrene used in? Do you know?
Yeah, polystyrene is usually known as styrofoam.
Right.
So it's in cups, it's in takeout containers, but it's also any plastic labeled number 6 is polystyrene.
Okay.
So a lot of bands will often tackle the expanded polystyrene first. So like the foam containers and cups and everything. But then you could also drill down and get all plastics made out of a number 6 plastic because it can't be recycled. It's only going to a landfill or incinerator or the environment. And number 6 extend to hard plastic beverage containers. Like if you get an iced tea or something, it's probably in a number 6 cup.
Okay.
Or straws are often number 6s. The harder plastic, but still thin single-use takeout containers are often number 6 plastic. So it's sort of, when you start looking at the plastic you use, you'll see that number 6 and you're like, oh, it's polystyrene, can't be
Okay.
recycled.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me see what else I had here. I think someone else stole my question on where the bags go. I'd be interested to know where they actually do go. And I remember when I was in college, there was some traction around like recyclable containers that were made from like old crab shells and lobster shells and things like that. Does that sound like something that you've encountered before?
I haven't heard about it. But,
Okay, there was that and like cellulose recyclable ones, but they even had some in class one day somewhere. But then, I mean, that was like the only time I ever saw it. So,
a trend we're seeing now are some businesses providing reusable takeout containers. So
okay.
like we've worked with the Indian restaurant Tiffin, who have a bunch of locations in Philadelphia and the surrounding area. And they're providing reusable, they're made of plastic, but they're hard plastic that can be used several hundred times, containers as an option for takeout and delivery. So that's a great alternative because it doesn't become waste. And they've actually said it's cut down on their business costs because they don't need to buy as many takeout containers anymore. They haven't lost any of the containers yet. Their customers have been great at returning them. So that's a cool way businesses are sort of taking the lead on this, but we're not seeing that adoption wide scale. So if bans on foam takeout containers were implemented, that's certainly a solution they could turn to and precedent there.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that was all I had. So thanks again for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So just in case any board member or council member has anything that came up during this last round, I'd like to give you guys another chance.
And Bill also has my email and phone number. So if you have questions following this, you're welcome to reach out and I can answer them.
And so I'd like to maybe give the guests a few minutes. We're getting long in our meeting, so I'd like to keep this relatively, concise if you can, so we can get out of here by, 8:45 at the latest. So I'll open the floor to the guests if they have any questions they'd like to ask Farron, Deborah, Ruth, or Sue.
Can I ask?
Shari's raising her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, and Sherry, I'm
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah, Shari, hi.
Hey.
Just a couple of thoughts. And trying to convince, so I volunteer at the Patrician Society in Norristown, and it's like plastic bag hell because we have to give out plastic bags and food in plastic bags. It's the way that the clients can carry the food safely. Some don't have cars, some just live on the streets. It's the strongest way to maneuver stuff like that. But then, instead of taking my plastic bags to Giant or something like that, I take them to the Patrician Society because that's the way it's just going to always have to be. We also use cloth bags that are donated, but people do not bring them back because we have food already prepared to hand out. We don't take their bag and fill it up, we just shove it out the window. It almost seems to me like if you have all these bins in supermarkets and everybody, and I see them stuffed a lot, and people are very prideful in taking their plastic bags and putting them in the container, thinking that they're getting recycled and they're going to an incinerator. Like, wouldn't it even be better to make people more aware of the use of their plastic bags, knowing that there's no place to take them? Then they might also be encouraged not to use plastic bags because they can't recycle. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm being duped or fooled if I take all this stuff and try to recycle it and I know it's getting burned.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a big part of the issue is that it's so complex and convoluted how our waste is handled and treated after we're done with it, that it's very difficult for us to figure out where it's going. So like, there could be a grocery store that collects plastic bags and then trucks them to Ohio to a facility that can handle them. And those bags get recycled, but they're also getting trucked to Ohio in between. But this information isn't publicly available. They just say, yes, we collect plastic bags for recycling. They don't say where it goes. Or for many years, a lot of our single stream recycling was shipped overseas to China, where some of it was recycled, but some of it was also ending up in the environment or incinerated or landfilled. And technically that plastic was getting recycled, air quotes there, because most of it wasn't getting recycled. And now China doesn't accept our waste anymore. And so it's caused a whole other issue for our system. But because it's so confusing for consumers, the information isn't widely available, and everything is super different, store by store, municipality by municipality, county by county. We're really focused on stopping the plastic at the source. Because if we don't create the plastic products, if we don't use them in the first place, then we don't have to figure out how to deal with them. We don't have to figure out where they're going, and we don't have to sort of try and navigate this complex system. Because we have the alternatives, we have reusable bags, we have paper bags, we have cotton bags. So it's much simpler and easier for everyone if we just don't use the plastic in the first place. And plastic bag bans are the most effective way of doing that right now.
And then one other quick question. People have become really used to using like Instacart and DoorDash and all these different services that all use plastic bags. What's going to happen to them? Because
they have to comply as well. We had a lot of meetings with GoPuff, one of those delivery services in Philadelphia, ahead of Philadelphia's ban. And they're like, oh, so many of our products need plastic, or we can only deliver if it's in plastic bags, or you can never comply with this. And we asked them, do you guys operate in Rhode Island? Do you operate in California? Do you operate in Connecticut? Yes, 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 they do. And in all these places that they operate, they deal with the plastic bag bans. They find a way to make it work. They figure out how to make it happen, and they're able to comply. So it's certainly, they might make noises saying that they can't do it, but when it comes down to it, delivery services are fully capable of complying with the plastic bag ban. They're fully capable of charging fees for bags because they're able to tack on fees for other things that you do, like a delivery fee versus a pickup, or distance of the delivery. If you're getting utensils, sometimes they charge for those. So they know how to make it work. It's just a little bit extra for them to do, and they don't like doing the extra thing. But when it comes down to it, they're going to comply. They're going to figure out how to do it. I should say there was a push in Westchester recently to have their fee taken out of their ordinance, and it mainly came from delivery services and takeout. And I believe they've kept the fee. They're pretty solid on making sure that stays in their ordinance because it's such an important part of it. So the delivery apps will just make it work.
Great, thank you. So I think just to, if you're Farron, you can hold on for a little bit. I think our next discussion is next steps. I did put together a issues document that we can use to present to council. So if we are ready to move forward, I think this would be a good starting point for us to present the issue to council, and then we could go to workshop, discuss it with them, get their feedback. So I'll share the document, which I did distribute at noon today, but I want to make sure we at least know what it kind of structured like. And I'll expand this. So this is really just a copy of Narberth's issue document. So the background here is pretty boilerplate, just some research on about the impacts. They included the moral argument. Of course, we can tailor this. This is not necessarily what we would necessarily need to put in front of council, but I thought it was a good starting point. And it gives a lot of good background in here. So I think the real piece that we adjusted was this section here telling our council how much other Mount Go municipalities are considering this. We could add a sentence here for all the other counties that are and munis that are working on this too. So that would be a good place for that. So as a recommendation, I think that from what I've heard from hearing Farron a few times is that starting off with the plastic use bag ban with a fee, an ordinance for that would be a good starting point. You know, let's start off with something that we feel will be something we can handle and something we feel that our consumers and retail can also handle. And then let's come back and work on the next level of plastics that we want to work on banning. But this will give us a good experience with getting feedback, find out what people's reactions are as we roll this out. So that's kind of what the gist of this implementation here is, that we could then do this in favor. It's just then some call to action here. You can take out anything that you want. So I thought that was a starting point for us to consider, because I think, before we do much more, we want to make sure we understand how open council is to this and get their feedback. So I guess, given what we've heard tonight, I guess if we're ready, I was going to recommend or propose this motion that we could start with tonight, and that we would ask the council to authorize us to continue our study, research, and education. So I think in a lot of ways, our efforts here will be helping to kind of warm our stakeholders to this proposal. So if we start now with education and we can start rolling out the reasoning for this to our residents and our retailers, then by the time we get to the summer, we can have the ordinance be ready to go, and we will have gotten some feedback from our residents, and then we can feel comfortable, because I think this will be a continuous process of feedback, iteration, tweaking the ordinance, and finding out what other municipalities are doing to go forward. So I'd like to hear the board's thoughts on both the issue document and this motion, and if we're ready tonight to take it to council for their feedback.
I'd like to ask maybe a question, and it might be a discussion point, and I don't mean to derail the looking at this specifically, but would we be thinking of potentially a future public meeting to discuss this? And I guess if there's time, maybe Farron, you could address that question. Has there been public meetings for these sort of ordinances in other municipalities? But I guess to limit the discussion, is that in the consideration we're doing for the research mentioned by this?
I hadn't heard about a public meeting before. I think a lot of ways we could get this out through literature, website postings, communications. We have several ways to do communications with our residents and our businesses. So I'm thinking education in a more direct approach is workable. But Farron, what do you find in terms of how communities communicate to their stakeholders?
Yeah, often a public meeting or hearing would happen after you've recommended specific ordinance language to your council, and before a vote happens. That way the public can make their voice heard ahead of the vote, so council members can hear it from constituents. I think a good example is Westchester had a few of these hearings ahead of their vote, and this was obviously pre-pandemic, but the hearing rooms were packed. There was more people than they'd ever seen for an ordinance before, and it was all people supporting it. So it's certainly a good way to make the public support for an ordinance known. You can certainly leverage local environmental groups like an environment or any watershed groups to help turn people out to those. But I don't think you would do a public meeting before you actually had text of an ordinance that you wanted the council to adopt.
Thanks for that. That clarifies it for me. And then I see this as like the next, like you mentioned, Bill, the very next step, the next baby step, so to speak, in this continuing this journey. Bill,
Yeah,
I think this language is appropriate, and I don't have any additional comments for it.
So yeah, I was just adding this last phrase here that Farron suggested. So when the ordinance language is codified and approved by council and the township solicitor, is that a fair statement there? So a public hearing should be scheduled when the ordinance is codified and approved by council and township solicitor and prior to council adoption at a public meeting. That's sufficient?
Can I jump in for just a minute?
Yeah, Karen, would love your feedback.
Yes, all of our ordinances require 2 public readings before they're adopted. And I think, and that's a time that the public can comment before we actually adopt it. So what I would say is that many times nobody shows up and nobody really knows. So what you would want to do is post as many places as you can to get people to come out. But we do, well, we adopt it at the second time that we read it, but the first time we don't even adopt it and there's always public comment. So just so you know, that happens, that's required. And what you want to do is get as many businesses and resident businesses and resident individuals to come out by advertising it. A lot of people came out for the fireworks one.
So yeah, so 2 public meetings will be scheduled after the ordinance is codified.
No, before the ordinance is voted on and adopted, there are two readings of the ordinance. And at the second reading is when we vote to adopt it or vote not to adopt it. So the first reading, the first announcement to the public, we don't vote on it, but we hear comment. The second time we read it, we hear comment and then we vote.
Gotcha.
If I'm being clear, sorry. I just thought I would sort of let you know that public comment is built in before we adopt any ordinance.
Could I drill into that just one more time too, Karen? Because at last meeting, I think we asked generally, what would it take to bring something for the council to consider? And you said like finding out what support from local businesses and the public would be. Do you see the gathering that support or determining the support as something before these public meetings, or would these public meetings be the time and the place to figure out where it sticks?
Usually what happens when somebody is bringing something up is that y'all would come to a workshop. And a workshop is, and they're open to the public. And the workshop is where developers present their proposals, get our feedback, get our reading on it. And I guess at that, I was thinking that it would be helpful for, I think, for members of council to know some of the things that Farron said. For example, you know, Target and Lowe's and Home Depot and Dick's Sporting Goods, I think it's nationwide. They've all faced this before in multiple states. And what I wrote down somewhere, the states that do it, and I think there were like he mentioned 5 states that have it statewide. So that's not going to be a problem. I think I was thinking more like, you know, Philly Pretzel and Tony Roni's and Carl Venezia Meats and places like that that use plastic. You know, might just be good. I mentioned that before I heard from Farron how it's really not that much pushback. So I think that's what I was saying was, you know, maybe we should know if there's going to be pushback from our local businesses, but I hadn't heard Farron's presentation yet when I said that.
Good.
But it might be good to know. It might be good for you to reach out to businesses and some residents when you come to a workshop. And we don't take public comment at the workshop, but you would be on the agenda at the workshop to present it to us. And you can be as fulsome as you can about other places that have done it, the type of lack of pushback that is received, how you approach the less advantaged members of the community, that sort of thing. You know, the way Farron did, the way he gave a great presentation.
Andy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I was just trying to go through the language here. I like trying to adopt or, you know, approve something like this and going to council, you know, this meeting. But my problem there in the first sentence is, do we want to limit ourselves to plastic bags at this point? I know what I heard what you said. You think it's a good building block. You know, maybe the final ordinance is focused on plastic bags alone. But I guess I'd like to have the approval of council to include other single-use plastics in our initial research.
Yep.
I'm open to comment, but I would prefer to to not limit ourselves at this
Yep,
point.
no, I agree. About that, or presenting a plastic and that generalizes it. So then we could make it the plastic bag ban, but this will give us the ability to research the full suite. I think that just in terms of what I think is achievable for us, I think the plastic bag ban is what I think I'd recommend we start with. But I agree, if we want to continue the study, let's just get the authority or the, you know, go ahead to do the full study. And we can continue that study subsequent to the plastic bag ban. So if we get the plastic bag ban ordinance together soon or relatively early in the cycle, then we can continue and, you know, find out when we want to do the other single-use aspects of it. Does that help, Andy?
Yeah, I prefer this approach. Listen to others as well.
You like to do them all?
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll see, I guess, what the what feedback we get. You know, I don't know what people think of straws or other things like that.
But this generalizes, does this generalize it enough for you that we could use this as a starting point?
Yeah, that's very, very general, I think.
I mean, if you'd like to tweak it, let me know. Lynn,
Thanks. I have a comment and a question, I guess. So it seems like a no-brainer to me that the overall impact to the township is positive, including sort of like from a cost perspective. Like I can't imagine that there isn't a net savings doing this versus a net cost to the township. Maybe there's some cost associated with if you hire a dedicated sustainability officer who's doing some code enforcement. Maybe there's some costs when you initially have to educate residents or hand out some reusable bags. But overall, it sounds like there's a tremendous opportunity for savings around things like, storm and sewer drain cleaning and, some of the other things that were discussed. So I guess in part, one, there's a question for Farron, which is that right? I mean, are we missing anything where there could be a potential cost that we should just be clear about from the get-go? Assuming there's not, or that maybe if there is a cost, it's not significant. Is that some of the data you can also share with the council? Like other municipalities have saved this much. There's small cost, big benefit. Like, is there some benchmark data that can be part of your presentation and what you share with council and with the public?
I don't have any data on municipal cost savings, partly because Pennsylvania municipalities haven't had these in effect for long enough for there to be any substantial data yet. I have asked around some of our national partners for data elsewhere, and they don't have any data on municipal savings. Most of the information is about how much it would cost businesses to use plastic bags versus how much they save with a plastic bag ban and a fee. But some costs for getting an ordinance would be review from a solicitor. You need to have a solicitor review the text of an ordinance. And then I think most municipalities, there's a cost to actually pass an ordinance. Like it costs a township or a borough some amount of money to add something new to their code, but I might be wrong on that point.
We have to publish it. We do it in the Times Herald. Our solicitor reviews all of our ordinances, also contracts. So there is the cost of the solicitor review it, but that's his job, and that's what, and I say he because it is a he. That's what he does. The advertising, and I think I would like to say nominal.
I mean, also if you wanted to provide reusable bags, like Pittsburgh, who haven't voted on an ordinance yet, but have introduced text, are already working to set aside money to provide reusable bags for the low-income community. So that's another cost you could factor in, but is also not necessary as part of the ordinance itself.
Good opportunity to get businesses to advertise and pay for the bags.
Mm-hmm.
Put their little logo sponsor on it, Home Depot, Lowe's.
I'm just thinking it might be something to highlight that the costs are insignificant, nominal insignificant compared to the benefits.
Certainly that's what Penn Environment would say, especially when you factor in the environmental benefits. But we are an environmental group, so we're going to be pushing for the environmental policies.
And someone mentioned earlier about finding out from our public works. So that would be Chris Loschiavo, and we can try to find out from him what kind of problems with plastic bags they may have experienced in our storm sewers and drains.
Yep. So we can work on this this kind of cost benefits document over time. Not trying to finish it tonight. I'm just trying to take some notes. So there could be a cost for this. This cost. Sponsors. So yeah, I'm not trying to say we need to have this language together. We can work on this prior to the council meeting. I think the question of us just going ahead with kind of being ready to give this to the council next, because I don't think it's going to take several months for the ordinance language to be developed and agreed upon and reviewed by the solicitor. So I'd say, let's get this into their hands as soon as possible. And then we can work on the details of how it'll start to flesh out. So if this is a good starting point to that first step, I guess I'd raise a motion for us to take this to the council next. Is there anybody willing to second this?
Bill, I just have a question. Bill, will
wait.
we,
Andy, Andy, your microphone went fuzzy when you turned it on. So go ahead, Ben.
yeah, sorry about that. I just had a question. Will we be, obviously we're going to continue to refine this. Will we be looking at this at the next meeting before we raise it to council, or will we coordinate over email? What?
I think we could take this motion tonight, and if we can adopt it tonight, we could take the issue document. I'll put it up on the Google Drive, and we can refine this. So the next council workshop is the first Monday of March. So we've got 2 weeks to finish this document. So we have to have the document done by next Thursday, the 24th. So if someone's willing to work on this with me over the next week, I think we could probably get it ready by next Wednesday. And then I would email it to Karen Weiss, the manager, and she'll put it in the packet for Monday. Actually, no, the council workshop will be the 7th, right, Karen? March 7th. Yep, Lynn's nodding, Karen's saying yes. So we've got 2 weeks to finish the issues document. So I think if we can clean up these two sections here, if somebody'd be willing to help me with that, and then we could ship this to Karen Weiss, the manager, next, in 2 Thursdays from this Thursday. So we have 2 weeks, and then we would present it, or we would go to the workshop on Monday, the 7th, and hear council's questions, concerns. And then we would invite Farron back to our March meeting to, try to, respond to those. And then we would create a response document at our March meeting or during our March period. And then we could send it back to council for their April meeting. And then by that time, they'll have been looking at the ordinance or the ordinance template language. They can start the solicitor reviewing it. Also looking at the evidence that we've got from Ambler and Lower Merion. He can look at several examples just to make sure we aren't doing anything unusual. So I think we've got some good headway here. So we can kind of have this working in parallel. So then by the time we get to our April meeting, we can start working on our educational pieces to go out to the public.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. That all sounds fine to me.
So is the board okay with this motion going forward to council?
Hey, Bill, it's Trish. I'm okay with it.
Any feedback, Mike? Thanks, Trish. Any feedback, Mike?
No, if you need someone to officially say you need a second, then I'll second it.
I want to hear from Andy, if I can hear his microphone. It's not,
Yeah,
not coming across, Andy. Can you get your headset? Karen and Lynn, do you guys feel comfortable with us presenting this to council?
This is Karen. I do. I mean, I don't have a vote, but yeah, I mean, I do. I was impressed with Farron's presentation. I didn't realize it would be so easy. I personally hate single-use plastic bags, just so that's my bias.
Well, it's great to have a advocate on council because I think that you and your peers can discuss this in your own private time and you know, see how the rest of the council feels about this, because I do feel like it's something that society is ready to tackle. I mean, I know that, you know, I simply miss, you know, the opportunity to take my reusable bag in sometimes, and I'm, you know, sometimes too lazy to go back get it. So I, you know, I know that it's just a behavioral change. And I think that once we get used to it, it'll be second nature.
Yeah,
So,
like you, I keep them in the trunk of the car.
yep, I know, I need to have them there too. Andy, sorry, now we can see if we can hear you.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, you sound great.
Yeah, no, I would second or, agree. I just the comment that, yeah, usually on these types of motions, we do go around to everyone. So,
Yeah, I want to make sure I got your feedback. And Ben?
Nothing else for me, except I think we'll have a really popular booth at the Township Day with this.
Yeah, we'll have to
We'll have to
explain.
keep that in mind. Be
So,
fun.
so I guess I'll formally ask a motion to take this motion to council. I'll email it to Karen Weiss tomorrow for a request to get on their March 7th agenda. Anyone second?
yeah, that's handy. I'll second.
And all in favor? Any not in favor? Great. Well, I really appreciate that. Good work. I think this will help us move forward. I think the tweak to this is that based on what Farron's been telling us about the other municipalities and the fact that there is such a favorable response to this, I guess, you know, I phrased this as educational notices that we will send out, you know, either in sewer bills and mailings to businesses. So I don't think we need to do a survey. I think we'll simply let our stakeholder knows what is coming and give them the facts and the a chance to kind of see, you know, what the benefits will be. And then we can ask for feedback. We can say if there's any public comments on this proposal, you know, we can funnel them back into a Google form and take all public comments. And then that'll be helpful for us as we go to the public meetings prior to the ordinance adoption to kind of understand where our public stands and what their view is on this. So sound like a good plan for us? All right.
Good to hear.
Thank
Nice
you.
job, Darren.
Thank you. Thank you all. So just wanted to quickly touch on our last agenda items. So we have a tree planting. Rick and Andrew Conboy did get together and they ordered 20 trees. So we got twice the number we usually get. He's got 2 locations for us to work. He's going to rent a pothole or a tree post, what do you call that? Digger, and get them all pre-cut for us. So all we'll have to do is go put them in and fill them in and water them and mulch them. So I think it'll be less physical effort for us.
This is the only
So-
time I have to use my pickaxe, Bill.
Well, if you still want to bring it, Mike, we can still give whose son came by, Mike's or
Dave,
Dave's son came by. We were putting
Yep.
him to the test. So we'll work on that, and we'll also reach out to the Shade Tree Commission, to see if they would engage with us. So, so yeah, Rick was, good on that. So I guess the question here for us is how many of you are available and think you'll be available that day?
And just so you know, I'm now liaison to Parks and Recreation, and they are interested in helping out. I told them it'd either be the 23rd or 24th, so I'll let them know it's the 23rd.
That's our first day, first day. If it rains, then we could go to Sunday.
Right, so.
Is it all at Colwell or is it somewhere else too?
No, he's got 2 new locations for us, so.
Oh, okay.
Rick will give us, I didn't write them down
Okay.
off the top, but, I know one of them is gonna be the, what's the park called, Karen, in front of the township building or next to the township building? What do you call
Oh,
it?
JFK Bicentennial.
Bicentennial Park. So I know one of them's gonna be in that, he wants to add some to there. I can't remember.
I have a
what's the-
comment.
Oh,
That's that April 23rd is White Marsh Township Day. I'm not saying it really impacts us. I'm just bringing that up.
Well, usually the trees are done early in the morning. Don't the township days start pretty much late morning to afternoon? I don't know.
and since it won't be as physical, maybe we'll still have energy. We can go over to White Marsh after.
Sure.
And then the Township Day on Saturday, June 4th, just like you to kind of pencil that in your calendars as a save the date. We'll have to work on what we would want to put out there. Just kind of have this as placeholders. If there, I know Andy had put together a proposal yesterday about a possible Facebook post. I didn't know if you guys wanted to discuss that briefly, or I know Ben had some reaction to it. Any discussion about the mask recycling through mailing?
Yeah, I don't have any more to add.
So are we at a stalemate?
I think that was actually White Marsh Township had forwarded that out, so just so you know that there are other townships promoting that recycling service, if you will. But I mean, I understand, it's always a trade-off of everything. Some things are good for air pollution or not, but very bad for water or something like that. So anyway, yeah, is it really better to be mailing all these things in? I don't know.
So is there any other opportunity that we could, I know they've got the biohazard, once they've been used, you've got your, bacteria on them. So I guess we can't collect them anywhere, that we could then just have them bulked up and, shipped as one package rather than all these individual homeowner packages. I guess that wouldn't work, would it?
I don't think they're truly
That seems
classified as
tricky to me.
biohazard. I
Well,
mean,
the masks that come off of my small kids are definitely biohazardous, considering how
Cut the
what
straps.
they
so
get.
they don't
But
get
yeah,
the wildlife.
I mean, a reflection on my own thoughts about it is that's probably the first time I really thought deeply about the impact of these masks on the environment. And it was in discussion of recycling them that led me to think of it further. But maybe that's just a trigger to think about it. Like, what is this really doing? Is it really a problem? How can we find other ways to do it? We could use something like that as a way to get people to think about it.
Yeah, it does raise some new challenges, doesn't it? So that's a good question on that. But independent of that, I guess the question is, what else is there an opportunity for us to publicize on our Facebook page, so we kind of try to keep a little bit more engagement with our community? So if anybody comes up with ideas for stories they'd like to share or propose, this is our opportunity to educate. and share. All right, well then, Rick's not here. He said he possibly had a game with his son, basketball tournament stuff going on. But he's interested in what we're doing. So he gave me that tree feedback on what he'd ordered. I guess just one quick one. I haven't emailed it out to you, I don't think, but there was a PBS special on Nova a week ago called Arctic Sinkholes. And I don't know if anybody caught it, but what they found since 2018, there have been these, the permafrost is melting. And of course, we've heard about the likelihood that that's going to release tundra carbon from all the vegetation that's been frozen for so long. So that's one aspect of the problem. But what they also discovered is in the Siberia that they've found these craters. And it turns out what they believe is that the methane builds up to a point and then it blows the earth up. So it wasn't, they studied it and they said it's not meteors, it's not, not another thing. They could find evidence of the earth being, flies out in a circular area. And they found multiple of these happening since 2018. So then the next piece of study they've been doing is these methane bubbles that come up through lakes in Siberia and under ice. They show that these are flammable, and the pockets of lakes are now growing because as the tundra melts, the lakes form in what was a frozen plain of land. And now there are these new lakes being forming, and then they create more of this, cyclical methane release. Then the worrisome one, and at the second part of the documentary, is that they discovered that there's a further depth of methane called fossil methane that's been under the earth for so long because it's been capped by this frozen shell around the Arctic and Siberian and northern climates. But now that there's been enough melting, these pockets of fossil are finding their way up, because as the upper earth melts, then they can now release. So that's an even more worrisome level of methane. And the point they were making was that it could be that there's enough methane in all these stores that it would double at least the amount of greenhouse gases we already have in the atmosphere. So the trick is that because we're warming at such a pace, that the melting is going to occur more and more as it goes along. So I think just for us in terms of environmentalists and educating our neighbors, I think that, this type of documentary evidence can be helpful for us to try to get more advocacy to our legislators, at the state and federal level. And we got to get our leaders to start taking, stronger action globally. So I'll forward that out to you, but just wanted to let you know that that's a little worrisome. So any
very
last
interesting.
comments from our group? So thank you all for your endurance. This is one of our longer meetings. I apologize, but I think it was a really worthwhile discussion, and I think we learned a lot. It helps us. The more we know, the better we'll be at educating our residents and businesses. So thank you so much for your sticking with it. And
Agreed.
thank you, Lynn, for joining us as our new liaison. We look forward to your further engagement with you. And Karen, sorry to see you go, but
Bye-bye.
we'll still be running into you around the township.
Oh, I'm sure you will.
All right.
You know me, I don't keep quiet.
Yeah.
That's
So
great.
can we have a
Great
motion?
meeting.
Can we have a motion to close?
Yeah, thank you all. Motion to close.
I'll second.
And Mike seconds. So thank you so much. Appreciate the minutes, Ben, and I'll get together with you on email, and we'll send them to Linda for posting in the township.
Great. Sounds good.
Excellent. Well, have a great week, everybody.
Yep. Everyone have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good
Take
night.
care, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.